everyone, this is Emily Leiphart here for Tailored Expressions, and in today's video I'm creating 4 cards with the Thank You in Bloom card making kit. This stunning kit features 2 sets of innovative stencils, and I'm excited to share it all with you. Let's start with a look at all of the kit ingredients. First up is the Thank You in Bloom stamp and stencil combo. The stamp features a big scripted thank you, and it fits into the template that comes with the 3 stencil layering combo. Once the sentiment has been stamped, you'll use the 3 stencils to create beautiful blooms around it. Next, we have the Awesome Blooms die and the Awesome Blooms layering stencil. The die cuts out all of the pieces at the same time, which is so easy and a big time saver. I love this idea. The stencil is a 2-part layering stencil where you use the left side to create the base image and the right side to add details. It's simple and so brilliant. As always, you get 6 envelope seals and 6 envelopes, 3 in toffee and 3 in rosewater. Finally, there are beautiful rose gold sequins. I've chosen a retro color palette for my cards, and the colors I'll be using are a combination of rosewater, honey, poblano, pepper, and Granny Smith. I'll also be using toffee and sugar cube as neutrals, and all of these colors will be featured in both inks and cardstock, except for Granny Smith, which is only featured inkwise. I've cut 2 panels each from sugar cube and toffee cardstock, and I'll start by stamping the sugar cube panels. I place it in my mini Misty stamping tool and place the sentiment template on top. This is marked as a template for the rubber stamp, however, that doesn't mean you can't stencil the sentiment with it. You can even use it to add a shadow to the stamped sentiment afterwards. Once the template is in place, I pop the stamp into it. All you have to do is wiggle it a bit and you'll feel that it's locked in place. There's a teeny bit of wiggle room, but it doesn't affect the placement. After I close the lid to pick up the stamp, I can remove the template. My first panel will be stamped with poblano pepper, and I ink it up a couple times to give it a good solid impression. The second panel will be stamped with toffee ink. The third and fourth panels will be heat embossed on toffee cardstock. The first panel is stamped with sugar cube ink and heat embossed with white embossing powder. The second panel is stamped with watermark ink and heat embossed with TE copper embossing powder. As always, I always use the anti-static powder tool before stamping and adding powder. Next comes the fun part. I'm using a mini stencil mat, which makes it easy to tuck these panels and stencils into the corner. I place the template on top of the stamped panel to show you that it's exactly where it should be. As always, each of the stencils is labeled with a number, so I place the first layer down and use bitty blender brushes to add color. I'm starting with rosewater for the large flowers and switch to honey for the daisies. For the second stencil, I switch to Granny Smith for the large single leaves and poblano pepper for the other foliage. For the third and last stencil, I once again used rosewater for all those tiny blooms that fill in the space. Now this panel is done, and I love how this turned out. For my next panel, which will be toffee with white heat embossing, I'm going to switch up the order of the inks. Since my ink blending will be done on toffee, the colors will already look a bit different. I start with poblano pepper for the large blooms and use honey again for the daisies, but I'm adding a bit more ink this time. I used Granny Smith for all the greenery and protected some parts of the stencil so I could use watermark ink and heat emboss the centers of the large blooms with white embossing powder. To finish, I used rosewater for the tiny surrounding blossoms. I love the softness of these colors on toffee cardstock, and here's a side-by-side comparison of the 2 panels so far. For the remaining 2 panels, I'll be using the Awesome Blooms layering stencil and Awesome Blooms die to add dimension. Now I'll show you how to use these products. I was so excited to play with these as they are a new concept, and I definitely hope to see more TE products like this. As I mentioned before, the left side of this stencil creates the base for the images, and the right side adds the detail. I'm using rosewater for all the flowers and Granny Smith for the foliage. To add the detail, I rotate the stencil mat 180 degrees so I can shift the stencil to the left. Here I'm using toffee for the centers of the flowers and poblano pepper for the veins on the leaves. Since this panel is only half done, I'm going to create another set on the left side of the panel. I rotate the panel itself 180 degrees and create flowers and honey and leaves in poblano pepper. This time I add details for both the flowers and foliage using toffee ink. There are so many different combinations for these, and I love that the process is so quick and easy. I decided to go back and make extra sets of flowers and leaves with different color combinations. I won't be showing the entire process here, but I wanted to have more choices for assembling my last 2 cards. I hold the coordinating die in place with removable tape and cut all of these images at the same time. It's so awesome, and I can't wait for you to try it. Now it's time to assemble my cards. For this particular panel, I wasn't entirely happy with the poblano blooms, so I decided to cover them with the die-cut blooms. I also cut these blooms from gold glitter cardstock and decided to add a shadow behind the flowers for that wow factor. This panel was die-cut with these stitched rectangle stacklets, and I layered it with the Petite Scallop rectangle stacklets in rosewater. I tried various combos before deciding on a poblano pepper card base, and now this card is done. For this next card, I cut the panel using the Frame and Frame 2 cutting plate. I used my tape runner to attach the middle section directly to a honey card base, and then added foam strips to the frame before attaching it to the card base. I love the dimension of this frame and the way the stenciled images pop up on the edges. To finish, I add a few rose gold sequins from the kit, and now my second card is done. For my third card, I've used 2 of the diagonal stitch rectangle stacklets to create detail and dimension on the panel. I start to arrange some of the die-cut flowers and leaves on the panel, and when I'm happy with the layout, I attach them to the card with glue dots and foam tape. To finish, I add some white enamel dots to the rosewater blooms. Then I use a corner chomper to round 2 of the corners and attach the panel to a toffee card base. This card is very clean and simple, yet it has several details that add visual interest. For my final card, I've once again die-cut the panel using these stitched rectangle stacklets and attached it to a sugar cube card base. This card will have a similar flower arrangement to the previous card, but the smaller daisies will be separated on their own, and there's a lot more greenery. Before I attach everything to the panel, I use the 3rd layering stencil to fill in the open space with toffee ink for a tone-on-tone look. This time, I only use glue dots since the copper embossing powder is this card's wow factor and it doesn't need extra dimension. Here's a review of all 4 cards. I hope you're inspired by all the ideas shared in this video on how to use the Thank You in Bloom card making kit. Do you have a favorite? Please let me know in the comments below. You can find all of these products in the Tailored Expressions web store at tailoredexpressions.com. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon.